Thank you for joining us for another episode of Boob Tube Boys. My name is Brian Vaughn. I'm here to tell you a frontier tale. Alongside with me are two other gentlemen from the past. One of them is Spencer Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I was wondering when we're going to drop this false, nice intro here that we're doing.
Yes, Mr. Lee, how are you?
I just only hope that someday I might live to be 42 years old, which is the longest anyone has ever lived in this time.
And is very near for you, sir.
Sadly.
Fred Funk sinks the putt
kind
on
of,
the 18th green.
You're full-aged if you were a horse.
What was it?
I don't know. They have like 3 lives, like different stages.
Colt, big stud Bronco.
Why don't you know this, man? You should know all about this.
I feel like I should, but I just simply don't,
Okay.
Unfortunately.
If for some reason you can't tell by whatever this intro has been,
And you can't. I'm just going to be honest. There's no one who will know.
This week on Boob Tube Boys, we are, and next week, talking about Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, a show that Van gave to me as we continue throwing shows at one another for a couple more weeks before we move on to something different. And I had probably never seen an episode of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman before watching these 2 episodes for the show. We often do this kind of at the outset, so I'm going to start with you guys this time. Van, what is your life experience with Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman?
Well, we kind of hinted at it last week in that I've never watched the show prior to several months ago, but I'll get into that in a second. When I was young, it would come on after whatever show I was watching, probably wrestling.
Looked like one of those shows.
And it was on syndicated channels as well. I know this was strictly a Sunday night,
it was
every week show.
A Saturday night at 9 p.m.
That's what it was.
CBS show, but then aired everywhere.
Everywhere. So what I remember is thinking like, this just looks boring to me. And then the song would come on. Yeah, and I just have no interest. So I never watched it. A few weeks ago, Katie, as longtime listeners might know, my girlfriend, suggested this show. She actually, by the way, wanted me to make Spencer do it.
Oh.
And it just didn't quite pan out.
But it was I
schedule-wise,
that had to
but
travel
you
back
ended
in
up
time.
getting it, yes. And primarily because I read the synopsis for the episode titled Birdman, which we'll cover next week. And anyway, she made me watch the pilot. And the pilot was actually a made-for-TV movie. It was 2 hours long that they then split into 2 episodes. Those then became the first 2 episodes of Dr. Quinn. So I know the origin story of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
But you haven't really seen any of it. Spencer, have you ever seen an episode of Dr. Quinn until now?
No,
or
not
did
at
you know
all.
it existed?
No, I really thought it was a man. I thought it was Dr. Quinn, Medicine Man.
And yet it isn't. It's Medicine Woman.
They make that pretty clear.
Very early on, that's kind of one of the hooks of the show. Like you guys, I had really no familiarity with Dr. Quinn, other than that my grandma was super into it, and I can totally see why after watching it. Lots of frontier, feel-good, kind of vague issue tackling.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain... It kind of runs the risk of falling into a territory of this time period, especially the representation of frontier life, colonial time period, where it's like, it's kind of just any show that's supposed to be about that time period.
Yeah, they don't really Dr. Quinn doesn't really feature a whole lot of new takes on the 1800s. And this show takes place in the 1800s between 1867 and 73, so right after the Civil War. And I guess you can tell by the fact that there's a lot of dirt and horses and stuff like that. And the premise of it is that Michaela Quinn, the titular character, has moved from Boston, the big city, after her physician.
Just like Frasier moving from Boston.
Lots of Boston getting involved. Her physician dad dies, so like a lot of people, they have a dead parent, they kind of uproot their lives. But this is the 1860s, so when Michaela decides to head west, it's a very serious, deadly thing to attempt. And she winds up in Colorado Springs, and the novelty here, or the big thing that makes everyone turn their heads, is nobody in Colorado Springs has seen a woman doctor before.
And in that pilot episode, or 2-part series, they kind of explain this. And what it was is she put out an advertisement after she got her physician's degree, or whatever you might call it back then, that
medicine saddle.
She put her after she got her medicine saddle. She put out that she wanted a job, and in Colorado Springs, they responded to the ad and said, "Yeah, absolutely, you can become our town doctor." She gets there, and everyone is befuddled that she's a woman. Turns out that whoever it was who was reading the wire, which, by the way, was not Horace at this point.
No, unfortunately. Horace is not great at his job, but we'll get into Horace later.
He's great. Well, anyway, he thought it was a typo, the Mrs., so he just wiped it out. So then the rest of the 2 hours is...
He thought it was just some dude named Michaela.
Well, the rest of the 2 hours is then her trying to prove that she's capable, and all the townsfolk like, no, well, we're just going to ship you back and get a man doctor. And then eventually some stuff happens, including her saving a Native American's life, her saving another townsman's life. Cole Meany rips her tooth out of her head, and then they love her.
Yeah.
And that's real.
Wow. The other thing that happens to Michaela while she is in Colorado Springs is she immediately... like her buddy dies, and she winds up taking over the lives of the 3 children that her friend had. So her life is then permanently rooted in Colorado Springs, which is where this whole series takes place.
And in that pilot, that happens. We see what happens to the friend. She was bitten by a rattler, and they can't save her in time. So
one of the 5 leading causes of death at the time.
You're supposed to just suck the venom right out.
But they didn't have anyone do that.
She were a real doctor, she would have known.
So Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, we've established what the show is. I'll also establish that it ran from 93 to 98. That's 1993 to 1998. And aired in just that short amount of time, 150 episodes.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a bunch.
Plus the 2 TV movies. And then when the show was canceled, which I guess was a big deal to Quinn heads.
Was it just ratings, or what was the cause of cancellation?
I didn't find anything concrete on it. I would assume it had just kind of run its course at that point, and they knew they could make enough money in syndication that filming new episodes weren't, that wasn't probably all that profitable for them. I'm not sure.
And we'll see next week when we cover that episode that their ideas kind of started to drain away.
Or intensify.
Or get better, yeah.
It depends your point of view on this. So yeah, the show was around for 5 years, 6 seasons, and as Van said, it debuted actually on New Year's Day, 93 was the pilot made for TV movie. And one of the weird things is they did some casting changes after the pilot.
Again, Cole Meany was Jake Slicker.
That's the thing is, how do you have Cole Meany as an evil guy and say, I'd like to change that?
This isn't cutting it. We need to move on.
Yeah, so they did. I mean, they wound up making the change to Jim Noblock to play the character of Jake Slicker instead of Cole Meany, citing that they wanted someone younger and more handsome. Yeah, then Cole Meany? Come on. What a dreamboat.
I loved him in Con Air.
The rest of the cast also was kind of put together strangely. Jane Seymour actually was not Dr. Quinn until the day before production started on the made-for-TV movie, when she read the script and was just like, okay, whatever. Which I didn't know. I assumed it was kind of a show built around her as the sinner.
Yeah,
as the
that's
star.
what I would guess.
You usually know who your title character is going to be.
Lead actor.
Like, you don't figure that out the day before shooting.
That's not one of those things. We'll figure out who plays the third cousin who appears for 3 minutes in one episode later. It's your main character. So, very strange. And for her trouble, Jane Seymour won the 1996 Golden Globe for Best Actress in whatever kind of show this is, which is kind of amazing. And we're going to go over the kind of the breadth of the show, what happens in the show for a moment here, because we are only covering one earlier episode, one later episode, but we will be discussing more of the characters. So our main cast is, of course, Dr. Michaela Quinn, which is played by Jane Seymour, who we've all seen in stuff before. She was in Live and Let Die.
Oh my gosh, she was.
Yeah.
There's always some kind of James Bond reference.
I guess there's so many of those movies. The other central members of the cast, her family, the children she adopts, the oldest, Matthew, played by Chad Allen, who you wouldn't know from anything. Colleen, one of the daughters, who actually was played by 2 actresses.
Yeah, they replaced one of them at some point.
Yeah, midway through the 3rd season, because she, I guess, didn't want to sign Erica Flores, the actress, didn't want to sign a long-term contract. I mentioned Jim Noblock. There's also Frank Collison as Horace Bing, the mailman wire operator guy. He has had the most success.
Really?
Post Dr. Quinn.
I feel like I would have recognized him in something else.
I'm going to say some things and you might.
Okay.
He had small parts in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, okay, yes.
I could see that.
Yes, absolutely.
He was in Silicon Valley, American Horror Story, My Name is Earl, and NYPD Blue. These are all real roles, too. that he
Wow.
had.
Interesting.
Not just bit parts. So
I mean, American Horror Story fits because he's a monster.
Yeah.
By all accounts.
Absolutely. And there is one more Cooper child that Michaela takes care of I didn't mention, and that's little Brian Cooper, played by Sean Tuvey. Other main characters, just a couple more. Old man Lauren Bray, who's mean, and he's played by Orson Bean. And
what an old man name.
Yeah. And the thing I love about Orson Bean is that he voiced Bilbo Baggins on the 1977 animated Hobbit movie.
Have you ever watched that?
No, I
hear
haven't.
It's horrible.
I'm sure that it is.
The idea of Orson Welles and your cat Bean are now in my head in the same mishmash. It's
Same
just
guy.
very funny. Yeah. The idea of Bean having anything to do with Orson Welles is very funny to me
They
now.
both did several radio plays.
And they both did commercials for peas.
Well, didn't you see Bean in her role in Citizen Kane?
Rounding out kind of the main cast.
Meows, bud.
We have Larry Sellers playing Cloud Dancing. Poor Larry Sellers, another one of his roles he's best known for is as Naked Indian in Wayne's World 2.
He was actually quite outspoken about Hollywood's treatment of indigenous people actors, Native American actors.
That is good because he bore the brunt of it.
He did. And, we'll get into it on this episode. I mean, there are a lot of bad things they did on this show regarding that, but they also did a couple of pretty good things. Number one, they had Native American actors, which a lot of people wouldn't do. But do you guys remember it's more Adam Sandler talk.
Oh, no.
The Mysterious Six or whatever. It was that.
Is that the one where he's got the TV remote that changes the future?
Oh, that's just Click, I think.
Is this one Mr.
deal.
Deeds?
No, it's not that one either.
That's Little Nicky.
This is where it's making fun of the Hateful Eight. It's right around when that came out. There was a big controversy because he had Native American actors on there doing really terrible,
okay, I do remember
things.
This. Yeah,
those actors walked out on set, and it was a big deal. Larry Sellers came out and was like good and was like pro part of this movement.
Larry
as well as some
Sellers, good for Larry
Hey.
Sellers. I'm a big Larry Sellers fan after hearing all of this.
I'm
stuff.
a buyers.
Oh wow, good one. I like that. Dr. Quinn. Once the show was canceled, fans clamored for that thing to come back.
Sure,
and it did. In the form of more TV movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was one TV movie in 1999 called Dr. Quinn Revolutions.
This is where she led the French to beat back the Germans in World War II.
Yeah, or it's like a future show. And she's got like a robot eye and a laser hand.
That'd be pretty cool.
The fans, though, the diehards of the show, did not like this made-for-TV movie. Neither did the show's creator, Beth Sullivan. They didn't think it was true to the Dr. Quinn vision. So, fuck it, let's try it again. Another TV movie in 2001 called Dr. Quinn, The Heart Within.
2001?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that one also kind of a lukewarm reception. But don't you worry. Jane Seymour says that it's just possible they might reboot this thing like every single show we're covering.
I kind of hope they do reboot this one.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see those kids all grown up as straight up fucking adults because it's 23 years later.
You can see Horace's face get even more droopy dog.
Okay, I'm game for that.
We've kind of set the stage here. You guys know all about Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman now, or as much as anyone needs to know. So, it's time to talk about Season 2, Episode 4, The Incident.
Okay.
What a haunting title for this episode, you guys.
Fitting.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, there's incident. There's definitely an incident up top, too.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I don't think calling it The Incident really covers what goes down in this, because it's not just, it's an incident, it's not a big deal. It's an incident.
Incident feels like a very whitewashed way to say what goes on.
Oh, there was an incident. Someone may have shot someone and covered up for it by saying it. They're shooting an animal or something. It happens.
It does happen, and it's about to happen. The episode begins in a forest, like all Dr. Quinn episodes seem to. Just kind of out in the wilderness.
With soft music playing in the background.
Yeah, a little flute. There's some deer drinking, fun little flute music. It's got a lilting feel, but not for long. Sully, one of the main characters of the show,
just landed his plane.
Yeah, he's a hero now. I neglected to mention Sully earlier. He's played by Joe Mando, the actor.
Has that guy done anything?
No, not really.
Okay.
And he becomes Dr. Quinn's main love interest in the show. They eventually get married and have a child.
What was his name again?
Joe Mando.
See, I loved him in The Mandalorian Season 2.
Oh, that's great. They always call him that, too.
Yeah, they do.
They're always like, Mando. And he's like, what? What? I'm wearing a costume. So we're seeing this peaceful wilderness setting. Sully's approaching a stream with a group of Cheyenne that he has befriended and apparently has a blood pact with in some sort of sense. And they also have a wolf with them. It's common 1860 stuff going on at this point. While this is going on, at the same time in these same woods, Horace, who's the town, I don't know, again, mailman and like wire operator. He probably has a pocket watch. He looks like a pocket watch kind of a guy. He's out hunting for deer with an old man named Lauren Bray, who I mentioned before. And, of course, the soon-to-arrive Jake something. Slicker. I almost said Jake Snapper for some reason.
Both pretty good.
Same kind of name.
I mean, it's literally these three people look like different iterations, all three of them, different iterations of Goofus from Goofus and Gallant.
There are no Gallants in this
Gallant
show.
at all.
Maybe Joe Mando, I don't know. So these three, this holy trio, will be spending much of the episode discussing. They're wandering about with guns, looking for deer that old man Lawrence claims he saw. I mean, I don't think there's any way to prove that they did at all. Horace doesn't look like a guy who would be a hunter. Jake Snapper points
He doesn't look like a guy.
No.
He looks like a monster.
Or Gumby, kind of.
He does look like Gumby.
Or a tree that's afraid.
He's an ent before it becomes an ent.
Yeah. He's here, though, and he's like, hey, I know how to handle a gun, no big deal. And Jake Snapper doubts that, because Jake Slicker.
You did it again.
You might as well just go ahead and call him that.
The thing about
now.
Jake Slicker is he's an asshole.
He's the worst. He might be one of the worst villains we've ever covered on this show.
And he's not a villain in the show. He's just a towns guy.
He's just unlikable.
He's a guy who lives in Colorado Springs with all of these main characters. He's one of them.
His great-grandson became Colonel Strong from that Mission Impossible episode.
And we see right here from the first scene that we're not supposed to like the guy because he's, first of all, dressed like he's in the Clockwork Orange and he has a flask. So it just screams danger.
So they've got booze. They're just waving their guns around, joking, not really doing anything. I really do think that's how white people hunt.
I think that, that's kind of why they like it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, what's about to happen is a series of events that happened a lot in the 1860s. And the first one being this. That's pretty normal, right, guys?
Yeah. Sounds about right. Par for the course.
Oh, shit. The second one's this, though. Uh-oh. Okay, so that's a problem. Right, guys?
Sounds like a problem to me.
So once that sound has happened, all hell kind of breaks loose at this point because we realize someone's been shot. Jake thought he saw a deer, but he didn't see a deer. He shot at some moving trees and brush, and he accidentally hit a Cheyenne brave named Little Eagle. And as Horace, Lauren, and Jake approach, they realize he's dead. He is lying on the ground, and they don't really know what to do. And that brings us to our third sound. Oh shit, that's the Cheyenne realizing what happened and shooting Horace with an arrow as Jake and Lauren run away. Not really caring at all what happens to Horace. Horace actually tries to explain that it was an accident.
He gets up and he's like, I can explain, fellas. But then they shoot him with an arrow because they just watched their friend die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let me reiterate that. He
die.
Is dead.
Dead on the ground.
The rest of the episode, the way they present it, it's like, it's not really that big of a deal.
No, that's the main takeaway from this episode is the callousness towards a human life.
Yeah, this kind of human life at this time. Yes.
Right. Hey, but maybe they don't go back to get Horace, but Jake does turn around to pick up a gun he drew.
That's right.
Which I thought was a nice touch in terms of making me hate Jake more, which seems to be one of the show's big aims. So despite the horror we've just seen, we get the swelling intro music again, and just like always right around now, it's time for me to talk about a title sequence, a credit sequence. And this one does not disappoint in terms of what kind of show it is, because there's trains and mountains and horses, and my favorite part where Joe Mando throws a fucking axe.
That's right.
There's a boy holding a wolf. It's pretty cool.
And of course, that music just makes it sound like it's an in memoriam segment from the Oscars.
Yeah,
it does.
It never fits at any
No.
point, especially when they try to do it in the middle of the episode.
When nothing triumphant has happened at all. We start the episode proper now after our cold open and our, well, it's kind of, cold because there's a dead body too. and the intro, and we get the start of from the 2 episodes I've seen, the start of every Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman episode, where someone who's hurt needs to be brought to Dr. Quinn for attention.
Yes, I'm sure that's, and at this point too, this is early in the show. So I feel like they don't quite trust her yet, or if they ever do. Is it Jake her right away? Like when they bring Horace there and he's got the arrow in him. So he's all the way back. They brought him all the way back and she's like, okay, let me treat him. He's like, you better let me get that arrow out of him. She's like, I think I can handle this.
I think I'm a doctor.
Yeah. And so it's like, so did they take Horace all the way back just so he could be like, I'm going to do this and not you? Like, they couldn't, if he thought he could do it, why didn't he treat him there before they brought him all the way back to Dr. Quinn?
Yeah, I don't think Jake's reasoning is to be trusted. And right away, as soon as they get into Dr. Quinn's office, they formulate their story and they gather their plan.
Yeah.
And let me explain a little bit about this because this did happen in the pilot I watched. Again, Cole Meany was playing Jake
I wish
Slicker
I
at
could
this
see
point.
him in this.
And what happened is when Dr. Mack made it to town, of course, no one trusted her. No one even wanted to be treated by her. They were all having these horrible, just mean actions towards her. Well, what happens is to gain their trust, she, of course, has flawless teeth. She goes to Jake Slicker, who at this time was their doctor. He's the one that was the acting doctor.
Can you just be a doctor if you want to? Because
at this point, I think it was just because, he knows how to stitch something.
I
so
can
they're
cut
"Do
hair.
that."
He can surely cut through bones.
So he was upset, first off, that she was replacing him as doctor, even though he wasn't a doctor. But she comes to him to earn his, respect and trust and says something along the lines of, I have a toothache. And he looks at her and he goes, it's got to come out. And she's like, what? She doesn't have a toothache, but she fucking sits there and lets him rip the tooth out of her mouth with no anesthetic, nothing, to earn his respect. And then this does, and some other things happen. But that was, him saying, let me do this, Dr. Mike. That character did his doctor stuff at one point. And so throughout the run of the series, I'm sure, because Jake Slicker's a POS, that he tries to do that a lot. So I understand why that happened. But to your point, Spencer, then why didn't you just pull the arrow out an hour ago?
Because he wanted to show her that he knew better. Like, I'm going to bring this dying guy all the way back to you just so I can be like, you better let me. You're a woman. I better rip that arrow right out of him.
Hey, Slicker's got to prove himself. He also needs to make sure no one tells anyone that he just murdered a man. So he makes sure that Lauren and Horace aren't going to talk. Lauren immediately was like, I would love to lie for you. I love covering up murders.
I'm a skeevy old man.
And Horace is a little reluctant. He doesn't want to do it because, as we are reminded a lot of times, Horace is normally an honest guy.
Sure, he's harmless too. He wouldn't hurt a flea, I think is what they say at one point about him.
Fortunately, though, Horace needs convincing, and hey, he's got some reasons why Horace shouldn't talk, right? Reasons anyone would agree with.
You saw what happened when you tried to explain to the Indians. Gotta be quiet.
Besides, it's just an Indian.
Right, guys? Come on.
It's just an Indian.
Come on. I mean, who cares? And he's got more, too.
It's only 3/5 of a person.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's not that long after this that someone says, you know those Indians, they all look the same. They have lines just like that throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, I think that's like that's like now.
Did you see who did it?
It was Indians. They all look the same.
There's Lauren backing up his buddy like a good friend would do, right, guys?
And this is par for the course for this episode. Plenty of this overt racism going down. And I mean, I guess it's time specific. I guess it's accurate in that regard.
I mean, it's accurate, and it's trying to do something. We'll debate if it succeeds.
Well, and also, let's look at it in today's lens or microscope of, like, migrants coming from Syria or whatever.
Yeah.
There are people here that are like, wow, we need to worry about our veterans at home. I don't want to raise taxes. I don't want to give money to this, but I'm going to say that I want to worry about them veterans at home and not them brown
Which
folks.
they're not. I mean, the way they're voting isn't putting money in the pockets of veterans either. Times were even worse in the 1860s, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in full force here. So after the cover-up is in place, we see Dr. Mike, which, if we haven't mentioned it, is what they call Michaela Quinn. medicine woman, entering the room, and she gets this first version of the story that, hey, who knows what happened? That's essentially the whole story.
It was anarchy.
Yeah. There's chaos out there, and we're mainly going to blame the Cheyenne. That's not what they say. They don't say the Cheyenne. At this time, Dr. Mike goes ahead and removes the arrow from an extremely bloody Horace.
This is my favorite line from this scene is Dr. Mike says to the helper or whatever, like, so-and-so, get me the cutters. And Horace goes, you're going to cut off my arm?
That is also a really good Horace impersonation somehow.
I've seen enough of him over the last few days.
At this point, the town
No, I haven't. I'd like to see more Horace, to be
I would
honest.
too. He's one of my favorite characters. He probably is my favorite character. At this point, Dr. Mike and the rest of the town really only know one thing. There was some sort of Cheyenne attack that left Horace with an arrow in him. Holy shit. Well, Sully rides into town at this point, and Sully and Mike, as I mentioned, are very close. And he tells her that is not what happened at all. Jake just fucking shot Little Eagle, and he's dead. And you know what? You're going to be surprised about this. They're not happy about it either. And this could lead to bigger and bigger problems. And as much as Mike trusts Sully, she also trusts Horace, and this becomes a central plot point.
Horace never lies.
No, we're told that a lot. He doesn't lie at all. This also means the lie in the episode's exposed really early to some people, which I liked. A lot of times that goes on way too long at that point. Sully won't settle at just telling Mike. He's going straight to the source, and he busts into Jake's barber shop, because Jake's a barber, guys, and apparently was a doctor, too.
And a dentist.
Yeah, all
He
kinds
does
of
it all.
qualifications.
He's a man of many talents. He's doing one of those Sweeney Todd shaves in here with the
Yeah.
with the razor and doing the haircut. And Sully comes in and tells the whole room what really happened. Jake murdered a man, probably assuming that it would make any sort of difference, and it doesn't, because the room is just some guy getting his haircut and Lauren. And they all essentially say, like, who cares? Who gives a shit? It's fine. Sully says he knows the Cheyenne. He knows Jake. And there's not much more there. He knows he needs to trust the Cheyenne, and as viewers, we do too. And the moral battle for this episode is set up, which is essentially kind of some sort of very strange, like the white man versus the Native American, with a special white man, Sully, in the middle to make sure everything goes just fine.
Look, these savages aren't going to be able to make it without the help of the white man. So we have our white savior in
We
this
have the
episode.
Last Samurai
That's right.
on
we
hand
do.
right now.
Tom Cruise is right there. Wait.
We have Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves at our disposal right away.
Was the Last Samurai Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
In
Okay.
reality, no. In the movie,
What was the one with Keanu Reeves? 47 Ronin?
yes.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and
Yeah,
I
I
did
forgot
not
about
ever
that
see
one.
that one.
Yeah, I haven't
knew
either.
about it. I did see regular Ronin, and not the 47th one.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately.
42 through 46. You can skip those
Not
two.
as good. Okay, so I came back in at a good time.
42 through 46? I meant to say 2 through 46.
Oh, so the first 41 are
are
awesome.
phenomenal.
The first
Check 'em
41
out.
row 9. That's the plural, apparently. You know what? Horace has some good news, and that's his arm's fine. The arrow's out. He's got to be in a sling, but that's fine. Mike gives him a clean bill of health, but also probes him for details on what happened in the forest that day. And Horace isn't saying anything, but he clearly is acting weird.
Yeah, not very convincing at all.
The ante is up, though, because the kids in the family, Brian and Colleen and Matthew, and probably like 8 more, run into Dr. Mike's office with a newspaper that's declaring Horace a hero because he didn't die, I guess.
Horace is a hero.
Yeah, well, he is, but not for the reasons
No,
stated.
not at all. He looks like Frankenstein's monster melted a bit.
Kind of,
That's
yeah.
what he looks like.
But he's like a lot less intimidating.
Yeah. Well, see, every settlement in the 1800s had to have a designated town doofus. And like, this is him. He fits the bill.
Yeah, when you have a show that is family friendly, you can't have a town drunk, so you need to have a town doofus. Well, actually, Jake's the town drunk.
Yeah, he's the town drunk.
and
sure.
the town murderer. And the town haircut guy. Again,
and the town formerly called Meanie.
yeah, which are most towns don't have that. Usually just one town has
I
that.
would argue they should.
I
It's
wish-
just something they could
I
work
deeply
on.
wish that they did. With this newspaper article out, it makes it a lot harder for Horace to really change his story as well, I would imagine. And doubly so because the boy cowboy, Brian, Dr. Mike's youngest adopted son, is so fucking pumped about this newspaper article with Horace. He's running around with it, parading it around, talking about how awesome Horace is, and how he wishes he could get in this newspaper. Which I'm sure he could. Like 10 people live in this place. Just do anything, you'll probably get in there.
And as we find out later, the journalist or the editor of the paper doesn't
Dorothy,
really know what the hell she's doing.
I think they just like drew her name out of an actual hat to be the editor of the newspaper.
She's the only other person in town aside from Horace who can read. So therefore,
she's in charge
by default.
I totally had an entire note about that. It was like, isn't it funny how at that time period, anything in the written word really was only going to apply to a very small percentage of the population because it's not been that long since people of any kind of large percentage could read. So the written word just didn't mean that much.
It would
back
be
then.
like being able to speak a second language. No one else around you.
Yeah,
knew.
you're only writing to a very small demographic at that time period.
Yeah, that is weird. And unfortunately, I wonder if that's what's going to happen again. I'm not sure. This is our first shot of Grace's Outdoor Cafe also, which is kind of the town's main gathering spot, I would say, where everyone eats their meals and gossips.
Yeah, so like the Max or whatever from Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
It's exactly like that. In fact, this was just called the Maximus. No, silly. It's Grace's Cafe. Lauren, the old horrible man, he's given this big old speech.
I love that guy. Every time he talks, he's eating something. It's usually also he's drinking like a steel mug of coffee or something.
Yeah, like I don't know what you would call that, like a tumbler, not a tumbler.
Yeah, I don't know what it
Stein.
was.
Yeah, it's definitely more like a Stein, yeah. And he's always drinking something, probably booze out of that. Here, he's loudly speaking, if Horace says anything weird soon that maybe Jake killed a man, it's because of his fever.
Yeah, he's delirious, I say. Oh, no, we should go check on him. But only until I finish my meatloaf.
I loved that part. Yeah, that's real. Van did not make that up. The group decides to finish at Grace's Cafe, eat their meatloaf before they go make sure, not that Horace is okay, but that he'll keep his fucking mouth shut.
Oh yeah, they were at no point concerned about his health. Not even the slightest.
Oh, let me point out too, I forgot to mention this about Jake Slicker. For your information in particular, Brian. He's, of course, as you said, the town barber. Prior to being the town barber, too, he mostly did like bodyguard work. And, he'd sit around, he'd play cards, he'd chomp cigars with his best bud, Farouk. And then by the end of Dr. Quinn, he became a cow tycoon. He went on, hosted some Fox News shows. He fought Godzilla in Japan. He looks like Bradshaw.
He does. So, oh my God. Yeah.
That's what I hinted at.
It didn't occur to me at all until this, but he looks like a tiny, like, mushed together John Bradshaw Layfield of wrestling fame, for those who know. And also, like Van said, of like Fox News late night money tip, soulless appearances.
Like an even sadder Jim Cramer.
Which is really, with more screaming. Which
somehow.
Is I wouldn't have thought that possible. There's going to be more screaming in this fucking Dr. Quinn episode, I'll tell you that. The Cheyenne pull up to dinner on horses here. And see, this is why, if you're Jake, you shouldn't stay to eat that meatloaf. You're going to get yourself into some trouble.
I bet it was worth it to him.
How good was that meatloaf? Meatloaf from the town square.
The Cheyenne are telling the truth, and they are pissed rightfully. Because one of their own, Little Eagle, has been killed by Jake, and they tell Dr. Mike, anyone around at the cafe, which is always everyone, that is the case.
And look, with Little Eagle dying, that means he can't grow up to teach Chuck Norris how to become a better warrior.
And if that doesn't happen, I mean, obviously those spirits are going to win later on in Walker, Texas Ranger, and you guys don't want that, do you?
No.
No, I didn't fucking think so. The Cheyenne are not going to let this incident pass with nothing happening because Jake Slicker killed one of their people. He's a father of two.
That Native American is dead. I'm going to reiterate that. He is a non-living human being anymore, and they do not treat it as such. Jake doesn't.
The Cheyenne have a thing that they want, and then Jake has a thing that he wants. The Cheyenne want him, Jake, to appear the next day before their tribal council for a trial. That seems reasonable considering he killed a man. Jake wants them to go to hell. That's what he asks.
Yep. Yeah, he makes it real dramatic, too. He's like, I tell you what I want.
And just when you think, how's this good? There's a lot of tension here. How will this resolve? Wild man Hank Lawson, a long-haired outlaw with mischief in his eyes, just fires a gunshot off into the air for no reason. And the scene just sort of ends with the Cheyenne exasperated saying, we're going to come back and fucking get Jake, though.
Hank Lawson, by the way, owns the town brothel.
Oh, does he really?
Which, to tie in more, another character we'll meet here shortly, Horace's wife, Myra, actually worked as a prostitute at the town brothel. But at some point, I think season 1 or something or other, she was fed up with, she owed a debt to someone. And anyway, she left, fell in love with Horace, married him.
You can see how, Dreamboat.
The actor leaves the show at some point, she does. So they get divorced, which I feel like didn't really happen back then.
Nah, it was impossible for women to do that.
Yeah.
Back then, divorce was the person was murdered. Or just kind of went missing in the mountains or something like that. Before we find out Jake's fate and the fate of the Cheyenne people, let's take a little break. Once the Cheyenne leave after Hank Lawson's wild gunshot into the air, that leaves the town with a decision to make. What do we do about this? Clearly the Cheyenne would like to come back and obtain Jake. Jake is one of the townsfolk, and who do we believe? And Dr. Mike's still not sure, despite Sully pleading with her increasingly. Like, you guys, it's obvious what happened here. We know who Jake is. He's done this. But Mike can't make up her mind still. For some reason.
And her whole thing, again, is that Horace is so truthful. Why would he lie? What reason
Horace would never lie, but Sully wouldn't either. I think her basis must be, well, Sully isn't saying, hey, I necessarily saw this happen, though he was there, whereas Horace is saying that. So she's very, very torn and doesn't think either of them could possibly lie at this point. And this is also one of, and I don't know if this is better in general or in this episode, but I feel like Dr. Quinn, the character, is pretty loosely characterized. And she
gets
kind of
a little more other episodes. And particularly this first one, she was really a tertiary player.
Yeah, that's what I thought. She didn't appear to be the main player in the story, the main actor. And I guess I was surprised by that, and that she was kind of just there to be the audience surrogate of like, what do I think?
I was expecting her to take on a more assertive role, like to show her, apart from helping Horace with the arrow that he came back with, I expected to see more of like her competence and how she got that position and everything. But yeah, in this, she seemed like trusting and wanting to believe the best in everyone. Yeah. And I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be her character or if that was just what we saw here.
I think that is true. Like they judged her by the cover. She's a woman. Mm-hmm. So she is so vehemently against that she will always fight for that. Until we have proof or, whatever, I follow my morals, and her morals tell her that she knows someone, Horace, with morals who wouldn't lie. I have to trust him.
And we see it happen a lot, like Dr. Mike's faith being tested, so to speak. Right here, even the reporter / editor / she has 8 roles in the town, Dorothy, approaches Dr. Mike and asks her what she believes, and she can't give an answer. And that seems to be the consistency throughout, is that until she knows the truth, she can't know the truth. Unfortunately, actions kind of needed a little bit sooner because the Cheyenne now know they need a little bit of retribution for what's happened to their fallen brother. There's an accident, and the town hears about it, that a stagecoach from Denver, it ain't coming on account of an attack. And Horace lets us know that in his, I would like to say delightful voice, but riveting is better. It's
riveting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm more interested in it than I enjoy listening to him speak.
Yeah. It turns out the engines are coming after us.
That's, again, frighteningly accurate.
Right. Well, I'm pretty sure over the series of this show, he doesn't stop growing. And he's good 9 feet tall at this point, so he'll be full 15 foot by the end of the series.
And it's all his head that gets longer. His face gets longer and longer over time. The stagecoach thing's not the only bad thing that happens either, because the Wakefields have their house set on fire.
How will he throw his knuckleball?
He won't now. He'll have to switch hands or something. That hand might have burned. The Wakefield house is burned down, and Sully fears it's going to get worse. But he knows he needs to talk to Cloud Dancing, who is one of Sully's best pals. Did you guys know that?
They're like blood brothers.
They are literal blood brothers in this show. Meanwhile, tensions continue to run high throughout the town because outside of a small building that might be the schoolhouse, there are a shitload of kids gathered. And Matthew gets into a fight with a vehemently racist kid and wins. but only because Brian ran up and kicked that kid in the shin.
It's in keeping with Boob Tube Boys tradition in that the person least likely to win the fight beats the shit out of whoever they're fighting with.
Yeah.
It's Old Men and Renegade. It's Johnny Cash, of course. It's Little Boys. That's just how it works.
These shows love to go for they swerve you at the last minute when it comes to fight scenes.
And the little boy Brian in this scene, I have in my notes, is dressed like an Amish man.
He often is.
Yes, he has the hat and everything.
He's got the little hat, and I've never seen a cheerier little kid.
No, not at all.
You know what also is, between this and Alf has a little boy Brian, and then, so TV shows are characterizing Brians as little boys, and that brought me to this question, are most Brians in fiction little boys?
We've got to think about the time period this show.
I didn't know Brian was even like an American name in the 1800s.
Yeah, no, it's just not so much in actual history, but in that time period, like you're about the age of Brian in the show. So they probably just name people whatever people were named at that time period. Like in 92, a lot of 8-year-old boys were named Brian.
Oh, a ton of them were.
That's true, yeah.
But
you're one of them.
But in the other 1892.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I feel like there were few of them. So now I worry that I have like a name that's like Billy or something.
Well, see, the problem
an eternal child's name.
The problem with Brian is you can't extend it or shorten.
It's going to be my autobiography.
The problem with Brian. It's like the movie about Kevin. We need to talk about Kevin.
Yes. Or a new title for this podcast. The problem about Brian. No.
That's only every few episodes, guys.
You can't extend or shorten Brian. You can't like Willie is a little kid's name to me. You can't go by William
It's
later.
not cutesy enough. It has to have an E on the end, like the E syllable.
Yeah, that's true.
I think maybe I'm in the clear here. Maybe I'm an adult.
Or like Bobby. I don't like adults who call themselves Bobby. Robert,
No.
Bob.
What
that's
about
fine.
NASCAR driver Bobby Labonte?
He's a pretty cool dude. He drove the number, I can't remember, Interstate Batteries, green Pontiac 420 down the left turn, wedge spoiler.
You can't, that might be right. We don't know any different. We have no way of knowing. So the newspaper talk continues with Dr. Mike and Dorothy.
I love this part.
And I'm really only talking about it
Yep.
because there's a part of it where Dorothy informs Dr. Mike that she's been reading a book about newspapering.
As the town journalist, I guess I should learn a little bit about this.
Hey, I'm 43. I'll get around to it. I'm going to go ahead and read this book about my profession.
And also, I wonder what the book is. Like, you can't now, if I want to be a journalist, you go to school, you do all the business stuff. You can't just be like, I'll go to the library and check out a book on journalism.
No, and also to make a book back then was serious.
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't just publish anything.
Crank those print press and all that stuff.
And it would be like the only way you could get information of any kind is you'd have to find a book about it.
You just pull out your iPhone.
Once this journalistic conversation is done, we head on over to the Cheyenne camp where Sully is really trying to figure out what to do about this Jake situation. We're reminded that Little Eagle had 2 kids who now don't have a father because Little Eagle was murdered by Jake.
In cold blood.
In cold blood. Sully says they shouldn't have burned that house down, though. Like, what's this eye for an eye shit? I need one more day to talk to Jake before you guys do anything else.
And they talk about I'm going to mess it up, the dog warriors. It's dog something, dog soldiers. It's basically the more war-centric group of the Native Americans. They're the action over war talk. That
comes up a lot throughout the episode, is that kind of divide of like, we need to all be civil. Again, we'll get into more on that later. I'll save my thoughts on that later. But for now, Sully is begging for one more day. Back in town, Sully's back again, and he's decided to meet up with Jake in the barbershop. Jake is seen here drinking a lot of water as fast as he possibly can.
It's booze.
Is it? Because it looked physically like water.
It probably was in real life, but it's supposed to be booze because they mentioned earlier he's drinking again.
Yeah, well, he was drinking at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, he's a drunk.
Class. That makes sense because I was confused only by the appearance and by the way he drinks it.
Yes,
which is not how you would ever be able.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, haven't you seen Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage? That's how they drink those boozes.
Now that's true.
At that time, it was probably real in Leaving Las Vegas, but yeah. I think perhaps a late-stage alcoholic could do that. It's not common. It's not.
That's true, but I
you
guess
don't generally see it like that.
if you're just
no.
willy-nilly murdering people, yeah, you could probably do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot that I would like to know about this whole scene.
For now, Jake just really doesn't want to tell the truth, and Sully really wants him to. Sully pleads with Jake to tell the truth and says hundreds of people could die because you won't. And Jake acts sincere and says, look, yeah, I understand the gravity, and then basically is like, not at the end of it.
He does. You see the look in his face. He's like, maybe I will cave and do the right thing, but I shan't. I've done nothing wrong.
And as if that weren't enough, he then becomes racist yet again and threatens to murder Sully. Sully is frustrated, but more than that, he's disappointed, and he goes to meet up with Dr. Mike.
That's the worst part, Sully. I know it would be okay if you just get mad and yell at me, but that you're disappointed really hurts.
That subtle head nod from side to side means a lot more negatively toward me than a fist to the face ever could.
Well, he's going to get a few here in a bit anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that scene.
Dr. Mike sympathizes here and still doesn't really know who to believe somehow.
She sure continues to waffle.
Yeah, she really does.
It's too bad, because I feel like it's pretty obvious that Jake's a piece of shit, and I feel like she should have known that. I'm disappointed in Dr. Quinn at this point. I really thought that she would take a side by now.
Sully, of course, is the paragon of wisdom, and he gives a speech here about sometimes people forget what they're fighting for, and they just want to win. And he's right, guys.
He is.
Sully is right about...
dig your heels in. It doesn't even matter anymore. It's just, I must win this argument.
Absolutely. At this point in the show, we head into what I like to call Taken, Jaken. Where Jake, in the middle of the night, is abducted by the Cheyenne coming out of the saloon.
Good.
Yep. Yeah. I'm ready to get rid of him at this point.
Yeah, it's great. It's not my favorite
Guess
Jake
what?
thing
You got
that happened.
6 more seasons of this.
And I know you're going to watch every episode, obviously, after this. So in town, they realize, they being the townsfolk, that Jake has been taken. Sully, Mike, Matthew, the whole family, Colleen, they're sitting around discussing the abduction. And Sully says, well, I guess I'll fucking go all the way back to the Cheyenne camp again. Mike wants him to wait till morning. Sully knows it's probably too important.
And the rest of the townsfolk, I believe this is the scene, want to, and they keep saying this, form a posse.
Yeah, they say it over and over.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
out of
That
blood.
word, too. Like, it comes up so much. Which, I mean, I believe that's probably historically accurate. I believe that was the solution of people at that time.
They were always looking for any excuse to form a posse.
Yep. And like, I don't understand this. Let's all get together and kill everybody. That's
And
like
the Colorado
what we did.
Springs posse would be terrible, too.
Oh, yeah.
These are not competent warriors.
One of the townsfolk actually suggests that they should go get Ron Simmons, but Dr. Mike just cautioned. You don't want somebody saying damn all the time there.
We already have JBL, and he is an HR issue to begin with. We get a series of scenes here that show the different town opinions. Horace is kind of doofy and scared and non-committal.
Wait, what?
I know. I'm just as surprised as you guys.
Doofy?
Usually he's just like smoking a cigar and saying babe a lot.
So composed.
Yep. Mike warns us of the damages of war. And then Sully again has to plead with someone, this time the town, saying, will you guys give me a day before you do what you want to do, which is bring in the United States Army. And it's kind of accepted among the good guys, like, you guys, if the army comes in, we're just all going to get murdered. So Sully knows he doesn't want that. Mike knows she doesn't want that. And even the kids, and this is the first we'll see of it, get an understanding that calling the army in would cause a bigger problem than it could possibly solve. Back at the Cheyenne camp, Jake is tied up and getting punched repeatedly, and it rules, and it was my favorite scene in this episode, probably.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching Jake kind of get some comeuppance here. Sully shows up yet again, probably exhausted from days of consecutive travel. They don't really show how long it takes, but it's got to be a while.
He's got good cardio.
Yeah, he does. He finds out the tribal council will be held the next day, and the Cheyenne say they're going to go ahead and do a little torture when it comes to Jake until then, and they tease turning on Sully a bit here because tensions again are really high. Even Cloud Dancing is kind of pissed at Sully for constantly being the middleman here.
And yet again, in Boob Tube Boys history, we've got a Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. method of how do we fix
exactly
this?
what I thought of. Is there's a lot of the Hercules episode that we covered in some of the dilemmas here. And it is handled more deftly here.
I think so.
I will say
who
that.
would have guessed?
I know that Hercules wasn't able to do it just as well. Kind of weird. We're back in town. We're at Horace's mailroom, and you guys, guess what? Horace is nervous.
He's fretting.
Yeah, and he can't hide it one bit. Dr. Mike and Myra, Horace's wife, as Van mentioned earlier, who's barely in the show, that at least to what we saw.
She's not in it a lot, but she's a secondary, tertiary character.
They're even more suspicious than normal of how Horace is acting, and finally Horace, he can't hold it in any longer. He gets up, he shuts the door, and he spills those beans.
Horace, I always thought you were the soul of honesty.
I never knowed you to lie neither.
Why?
I didn't want Jake to get in no trouble.
Well, he's certainly in trouble now.
Jake and Lauren, they told me to keep quiet. They made it seem like the best idea. They said it was the only way to keep things from getting out of hand.
But you must have known.
I wanted to go along. They never liked me. They made fun of me. Never let me go hunting with them before, but this time I was right there with them. I was one of them, and if I told, I was afraid they'd never be my friends again.
Oh, Horace was so close.
Gosh, I just need a friend.
Or Horace.
He had a grasp at friendship and everything he ever wanted. The fraternal love of a male friend or a group of them, and it was snatched away because he had to tell the truth. So what did you guys think of Horace's reason for covering up a murder?
Horace has good intentions, and I get it. And really, this just points out that this whole episode is just about peer pressure. That's really what it is.
Yeah, more than like racial tension or anything like that. Myra's thrilled Horace told the truth, and she gives him a kiss on the cheek, which I looked it up, and in 1867, a kiss on the cheek is double penetration.
Wow.
So there's like a second person there even.
Yeah, Dr. Mike was into that.
Yeah, I know.
Dr. Mike, tell me about the rabbits again.
So as pleased as Myra is, Lauren is that displeased that the truth has been told. And Dorothy...
I'm going to go being John Malkovich.
Which he was.
He was.
And that's not the only anger we're going to see here either. Lauren's pissed that the truth's out. Dorothy is pissed at Lauren for lying. Matt is pissed at Dorothy for reporting a story she hadn't fully researched.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
People are supposed to believe what you read in newspapers.
Yeah, fake news. With all this anger, though, Horace kind of isn't. He realizes what he needs to do, and he says he can stand witness to what happened alongside the Cheyenne people.
And every time he is in a scene and doesn't have an active line or anything to do, he stares at a co-worker. It's a weird way to say it.
Well, technically, yeah.
But yeah, a co-worker, another actor.
They all met around the water cooler, if that was a thing then.
And he's got that wax face that's melted a little bit, and he's just like, and it's just yuck, and it's goofy.
I was getting ready
to say, I love him so much.
I do too, and he's lovable even when he does reprehensible things, because it's like, oh, Horace didn't know any better. He's kind of a moron, but he's so well-meaning, and also maybe he's supposed to be smart.
And technically, he suffers more punishment than Jake Slicker does because he got shot with that arrow.
That's true. Every single person on this show, I was going to say it about Horace and then realized I should broaden my horizons, looks like they either just stepped off of a train or want to get onto one, with big dreams swimming about in their head. We're back with the Cheyenne once again. Sully's trying to be nice to Jake. He gets him some water while he's tied up, because again, Sully is a very compassionate man. Jake says, Sully, it was Horace who did it. I'm finally going to tell the truth. That's not the truth.
He is committed to nothing if not being an asshole.
Exactly. He even then finally, after trying to pawn it off on Horace, he admits at least at this point to Sully that he thought it was a deer when he fired that shot, and instead he struck Little Eagle. So he finally tells the truth. So I thought, watching this and not knowing that Jake was a main character, so to speak, this was Jake's turning point, and he's going to essentially be a good dude here. No, right away, even after admitting it, he says a bunch of racist shit, and Sully is mad, right, as he should be, right away. Like, you're not even grateful that I'm here trying to be your advocate. Right around this time, Mike and Horace arrive, and they're here to confirm the truth that Jake is a murderer, which sends Sully into overtime. He's got a lot of negotiator work. He begs for peace, and it breaks down pretty much right away, and he actually gets in a physical fight with Cloud dancing as BFF.
Yeah, I kind of felt like, I don't know why he was so passionate about anything regarding Jake to where he'd fight his Cheyenne people.
It's the bigger picture.
It's that if they kill Jake, the army's going to come in and kill everyone.
This is going to be decimation for a people, perhaps everyone there. We're going to head back to the town where, you're not going to believe this, the townsfolk are in a frenzy again, or a continued frenzy.
To be fair, I have to be like, okay, I get it, because what is there to fucking do?
Yeah, this is very eventful.
You just get into a tizzy. Why not?
You get into a tizzy, like sometimes you see a cool tumbleweed or something like that. But that's
and you talk about that for months at the dinner table. Like, shit.
What would Horace have to say about that tumbleweed?
Black tumbleweed blew my mind.
God, if I close my eyes.
It is accurate.
It's like
I sure am friendly to everyone, though.
So there was a moment in one of the scenes, I didn't see it a lot, but the backdrop and what they're trying to show is like, well, this is the area that we're in. Like, I really got a strong Hey Dude vibe. Like, just of the... It didn't look real for one thing.
Well,
and they
this
were
was
trying
shot
to...
at Paramount Studios in California.
So it wasn't actually...
No.
I had no idea. I mean,
the 90s just didn't do that, I guess.
Yeah, it's probably, I guess, expensive, like too expensive, prohibitively expensive, I assume.
Yeah, especially for something like this where it's more about churn and burn than it is
Yeah, exactly. Who cares?
anything.
Who cares if you're on site?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone in the town is, as I said, just freaking the fuck out, and they want to call the army in still, but there's only one man capable of calling the army, and that's Horace. And
because
Horace
somehow
is at the Cheyenne camp.
The biggest doofus in the town is the only one who can read and write and send messages.
Yeah,
and
he sends telegraphs through the wire and stuff. No one else knows how to do that. The town's divided on what to do in general. Dorothy wants to wait, just like Mike and Sully do. Lauren, again, wants to call now, and he's kind of riling up the morons to do that, to call in the military. Meanwhile, back at the Cheyenne camp, Jake is untied, and it's time for his tribal council. The first thing Dr. Mike notices about the Cheyenne tribal council is they allow women on it, she is just sitting there like, what?
I love this bit.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
And, well, I'll say this, too, about this Native American translator they have, because he's translating everything that's going on to Dr. Mike. He sounds like the biggest doofus. And the second biggest doofus, because Horace is here.
Horace is number one in our hearts in doofusidity forever.
But the way he talks in this scene is like, well, okay, so Chief Blackkettle has determined that this is what should happen. But anyway, the joke I like there is again, you have women on your tribal council? You don't?
Yeah, that you don't give women a say?
Mm-hmm. No, it's going to be a couple hundred more years, and we're still not there yet.
Where we are, when a woman tries to become the leader, foreign countries even get involved. Like, there are just big steps taken to make sure that a large sack doofus wins instead.
Comrade, we cannot have this.
Also, why was this news to her? She should be fully aware that no one's going to take a woman seriously, obviously.
Well, I think that's her surprise is that someone is, which is the Cheyenne people. Mm-hmm. She's like, whoa. How's this possible? Why can't this happen in my stupid town? Which is also one of the show's things where it's trying to juxtapose the culture and be like, see, not all of this culture is bad. And there's a lot of that kind of both sidesism that goes on in Dr. Quinn. During the trial, everyone gets to sort of throw out their arguments, some closing arguments, obviously. Sully speaks and addresses his middleman position and says, who he really sides with? The truth.
That's a Matlock thing to say, right?
Yes, it definitely is. Blackkettle, the chief that Van mentioned earlier, he speaks and he says it's the only place a leader should stand is with the truth. Back in town, the kids have decided that they stand with the army not coming, and they figure out the secret way to prevent a wire from being sent to bring in the army, and that's to cut the wire physically. Just cut it in half.
Noted that Brian in the show, not Brian Vaughn sitting in front of me, has the same kind of technical skill that Mr. Ernst had.
Yes.
Only in this case, it's just like, how do we fix this issue? Oh, just cut it.
See? It's another Hey Dude tie-in.
There you go.
Mr. Ernst is basically
same
like...
show.
It might as well be.
Yeah, it's basically like Horace. Like, in a lot of ways, like kind of bumbling around.
I don't know. Like,
about a third of his size.
I feel like one of them might be less likable than the other.
Well, that is definitely true. Horace rules.
Horace has never had a megaphone.
I actually hated Horace for a while, and then I understood. I got what they were doing with him. At first, I didn't like it. He shouldn't have covered for the murder. Okay,
that was pretty fucked up, guys.
Horace is a piece of shit, but he's dumb. He just wanted a friend, so it's fine.
But his goober charm won you over.
I mean, it didn't, but he's not as bad as Jake. Jake is awful. I never liked Jake.
He's the worst. And we're about to find out what happens to him.
Death.
Yep, Jake dies right here.
The Cheyenne rip his hair right off his head.
Sully, in his arguments, continues that violence just is going to beget more violence.
That's true.
Dancing Cloud's still pissed throughout this whole thing, and he says, hey, war is coming. Not winter, but war, rather. And Chief Black Kettle says, no, fuck that. We're not doing a war. If you disagree, step forward. And it looks like we have peace. Sully does some speaking to his people, the villagers, and said, the tribe understands that no one communicating is a bad thing. Jake's going to survive this one, but we're going to need a lot of horses, foods, gifts, any kind of items given to Little Eagle's family because they don't have their father.
He is dead.
He is dead. And the council agrees, yeah, we're going to go ahead and let Jake go, and we're not going to start a war over Jake. So Jake is a free man. And even now, granted his fucking freedom, when Sully asks Jake to give up his watch and ring to Little Eagle's family, it's like a big deal, and Jake really hems and haws and drags his feet on the issue.
He shows no signs of remorse at all.
Never.
And that makes me feel like, just drag it, tie him back up to that post.
Yeah. Get rid of this guy.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It was hard to want such a compassionate end for him because he just, you said, no remorse ever.
No, he's an irredeemable guy, and he's in our next episode,
and
by
I
the
hated
way,
him in that one,
and
too.
And he sucks there, too.
Yeah, I was like, oh, God, that guy is in this again.
And Sully does this corny thing here, and it's corny, but I still liked it because I just disliked Jake so much, where he's then like, hey, guess what? Give him your horse, too, jackass. And then he does a little one-liner Sully does to Jake and says, hey, you can keep your shoes, though. Implying you could walk your way back.
That was actually
I didn't notice
Cloud
that, but
Dancing.
that is clever.
That said
was that
to
Cloud
him.
Dancing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I must have not been paying as close enough attention to this as I should
I
have.
sure wasn't. I had checked out by that point.
And Sully, as our hero here who convenes with the Native Americans, obviously looks just like a Native American, too. I mean, no difference at all.
If you squint, he's tan.
He's a little tan.
He has some cool vests, which I would assume Cloud Dancing gave him or made him.
And he has that wolf.
And he does have a cool wolf.
Now, the actress, by the way, who plays Little Eagle's wife, again, the dead Native American's wife, was so good in this because she's got like those rage eyes. And she was staring daggers at Jake Slicker the whole time while he's like, well, I ain't giving you my
They're also
ring.
like up on horses, so they're standing up above looking down upon Jake Slicker. And I don't even think this was on purpose, but I liked the framing of it. It's one of the few things where I was like, oh, that's a good decision or accident. With these shows, you really never know. Sully shakes hands with his friends in the tribe. Some flutes and pianos seep their way into the sound mix. Flute? I think so. It's a personal pan flute.
Oh, Pizza Hut sells those. They're great.
Mm-hmm. The good guys convene back in town so the kids can tell the tale of the cut wire, and that's it. That's the incident. The incident actually could have been referred to as the senseless murder of a Native American man.
In a near like total bloodbath war.
Yes.
Like it just about became something very huge, much more than an incident.
And seriously, fuck the white savior bullshit. That's okay. The terrible
we should
aspect
start
of this.
there. I think that the episode is trying to do a lot of heavy lifting thematically.
I think it had a good heart, too.
I do,
There
too.
were lots of points where it made clear that any kind of view towards Native Americans being lesser or whatever is wrong. Yeah, They made that clear.
They made that totally clear. What they were not willing to do is essentially say more of the blame here or more responsibility needs to be on the shoulders of the people who came and took and colonized a land and upset a way of life and introduced smallpox. And instead, the focus was kind of put on like, both sides, guys. You know, there's good people everywhere. And I understand that sentiment. Maybe I'm sensitive due to America's political climate of the past few years, but it doesn't always work that way. Things aren't equal in that sense.
The way they worded it was Black Kettle, Sully is translating for him, literally said, as long as we have one white person talking to us, then there can be peace. And like, I get the conceptual idea of that. As long as there's a bridge to allow us to communicate, we can do it. But that, in and of itself, is just a statement that really shows that the situation's already too fucked.
Yeah, and I guess that's my only real problem with kind of the handling of a lot of this material in the show is there's way too much lending credence to some of the common white arguments.
Yes.
I would say,
Well,
for
sure.
my taste.
Yeah.
But probably this was not, I doubt as many people would have thought that about the show in 1990.
Yeah. Again, it's a product of the time. And I actually think it was quite progressive for its time in a lot of ways.
I'm always impressed, like, when I see stuff like this, it's always like, oh, there were actually hints of people that were making a point of preaching equality, but even then at that point, in some degree. And sure, it's not like it is now, not to say that now has got it figured out either, but it's nice to know that people have been kind of beating that drum for a while. And honestly, if they had beaten it any more directly, I don't think it would have been more effective. I think at that time period, especially, you had to do it the way they did it, catered toward white men, because if you go too hard on that message, it would have fallen on deaf ears at that time.
Perhaps.
It still probably does anyway.
But that's an argument I guess, like, personally, I don't subscribe to. I feel like you got to just give it to them, and if they can't handle it, then they will. Like, it'll be a thing that gets out there, and maybe if it doesn't work at the time. So I guess it's like, but maybe this is just a me thing. I don't like when shows try to toe a bunch of lines to appeal to more people rather than saying their mind.
And that's perfectly fair. I don't think they had that call, though, considering they have to
this
pander
was
to
a
so many people.
money-making
There's no way they could have
enterprise.
delivered the message
No.
without having to listen to how people wanted them to deliver it. So, there's only so much they could do.
Yeah, and there's also a way you can look at this where there's some strangely progressive ideas in this show, like that there shouldn't be a death penalty, for instance.
Yeah.
Ideas that might have been more rare among the target audience at that time.
I still thought it was really funny. Like, at 1 second, Sully's like rolling around on the ground and clawing at
dancing.
Cloud dancing. He's like clawing at his throat, and like the next scene he's like, I am caught between two great peoples. He's got dirt in his face from the fight with cloud dancing. It was just great how a second he's like, rah! And then he's bringing it back in. Like,
you could practically hear the and cut between those two things happening. Well, do we have any final thoughts on this episode?
I do.
Okay, great.
How do you murder a person
Mm-hmm.
and then get 4 more seasons out of the character at minimum?
That's something
they go back to just normal.
So I assumed this was it, and Jake was off the show, or maybe this was his last season on the show.
And not only that, but he's, like I said, he's not even likable in the one we watched 5 years later. He's still a piece of shit.
He's like the primary antagonist, I think.
But
right.
How many seasons of an antagonist do you need of this guy doing that? It's like, I've had enough.
A little fun town antagonist would maybe like steal someone's oats or open their mail.
I didn't murder an
Yeah.
American.
I didn't think that would be the case. And he's done so much in this episode alone that you could never trust the man.
You would never
because he never
like him.
repents. Not right up until the end of the episode. He never does.
And he actually, in the next episode we'll discuss, he mentions, I'm mayor of this town. There was apparently, I read this, a season where both he and Dr. Mike ran for mayor. He ends up winning because she endorses him, I believe, because he made the concessions that women now have a say in things. So the women's suffrage stuff actually comes into play a couple seasons later. But still, that man gets voted mayor of the town.
A murderer. I mean, I know that technically happens all the time in our politics one way or another, but a physical murderer. He shot a man.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh. Yeah. Will there be murder next time around? Well, we're going to see.
Tune in to find out.
Next week, we're watching season 6, and it's either episode 18 or 19, depending on where you're watching it. And it is an episode titled Birdman, and you'll know why very quickly.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, it is an adventure to go on, and we can't wait to go on it with you. We've also got a lot of other stuff going on. If you'd like to support us for as little as $2 a month, go to patreon.com/Bootu Inc. We do bonus content each week. Some of it's nuts, and for Halloween this month, we wrote and read our own creepypastas, and it was extremely fun, and we think you guys are going to really enjoy it. That's a fun thing to check out. You can also read stuff we write on boobtubeboys.com. You can check us out on Twitter or Instagram at Boob Tube Boys. We're all on Twitter individually as well. I'm at Loud Guitar Brian Van.
At Manly Van Lee.
I like you splitting that up as like it's all one word. I'm at the number 3 French_hen. If you're my 10th follower, I will send you a gift basket.
What's going to be
That's
in the
an
gift
amazing
basket?
It
deal.
doesn't matter because because it's not going to happen. Also, we're going to have a YouTube. Since I'm making promises.
Thank you for getting that in. We needed to get that in here.
Haven't had that yet.
So until next week, may your wagon wheels remain intact.